The city exhaled a dying breath of twilight as he arrived, a phantom limb of power manifesting amidst the crumbling grandeur of the vain building. It stood, a monument to a forgotten age, its once lustrous marble now veiled in a fine dust of despair, its gilded cages echoing with the silence of inevitable ruin. Alistair Thorne. The name itself was a whisper of steel and shadow, a promise of both salvation and damnation. He moved with an effortless grace that belied the immense weight of his presence, each step a deliberate stroke in a ruthless game. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old money, stale fear, and the desperate, cloying perfume of fading hope. The Vane family, a tableau of exquisite anguish, awaited him. Two sisters, porcelain dolls in their carefully chosen silks, sat rigid, their gazes fixed on a future already foreclosed. They were beautiful, yes, but their beauty was a fragile, cultivated thing, easily broken. Alistair surveyed them with the clinical disinterest of a connoisseur examining flawed art. His own internal landscape was a stark, efficient machine, devoid of sentiment, driven by acquisition. The Vane legacy was ripe for the taking, a dynasty on its knees, drowning in a tide of debt that only he could stem. His voice, when it finally cut through the hushed tension, was a low, resonant chord, a silk cord tightening around their collective throat. The terms are simple, yet absolute. Your name, your history, your very breath of survival, for a bride. A strategic alliance, a blending of lines, to erase the stain of your current insolvency. He watched their faces, the subtle flinches, the barely concealed horror. This wasn't a proposal, it was a hostile takeover, cloaked in the deceptive finery of a wedding vow. He had come to buy their future, and the price was one of their daughters. Then, the door creaked open again, and a different kind of storm entered the meticulously curated room. She was late, wildly so, and entirely out of place. Eloan. Her clothes, a practical canvas of faded denim and worn cotton, bore the faint, earthy scent of fur and disinfectant, the telltale marks of her gritty work at the animal shelter. A smudge of something dark marred her cheekbone, and a stubborn strand of hair had escaped its loose braid, framing a face that was, in that moment, beautifully, dangerously defiant. She met his gaze not with the terrified subservience of her sisters, but with an open, untamed scorn that bit into the polished air. A bride? Her voice, though low, carried an unexpected edge, a raw, unvarnished disgust. So this is how the mighty fall. Not with a whimper, but with a sail. A woman, a human being, reduced to a transaction to save your precious legacy. The words, sharp and unafraid, were a jolt to Alistair's carefully constructed indifference. He had anticipated pleas, tears, perhaps even a quiet, resentful acceptance. He had not anticipated this raw, visceral contempt. It was like a splash of ice water, shocking him awake, and something primal stirred within him. Her fire, untamed and burning so brightly in the face of utter defeat, was an anomaly. An exquisite, inconvenient anomaly. The prim sisters faded into the background, their carefully constructed submissions suddenly insipid. His gaze sharpened, narrowing on Eloan, on the defiant thrust of her chin, the glint of rebellion in her eyes. It was not beauty, not innocence, that drew him then, but a spark of something untamed, a challenge he hadn't known he craved. A slow, predatory smile touched his lips, a dangerous revelation of intent. Indeed, he purred, his voice dropping to a silken, lethal whisper that seemed to wrap around her, claiming her even then. A transaction, and it seems I have found my prize. He bypassed the trembling, compliant figures of her sisters, his eyes never leaving Eloan's. You. The single word hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement. She will be my wife. The deal was sealed, not with a contract, but with the cold, absolute certainty of a predator choosing its prey. Less a union, more a silent, brutal conquest. The city lights bled across the panoramic windows, a glittering mockery of freedom. Each distant gleam a reminder of the chasm between my gilded cage and the indifferent world beyond. Cold marble bit at my bare feet, a stark contrast to the velvet trap of the penthouse that now held me captive. Every breath was a silent scream, a desperate prayer that even here, in this fortress of opulence, I could still find a sliver of myself that hadn't been devoured. My reflection in the polished obsidian walls showed a stranger, defiant, yet trembling on the precipice. He stood by the window, a silhouette against the endless urban sprawl, a creature of shadow and power, his presence a heavy cloak in the silent air. Alistair, my captor, my tormentor, the man who owned my temporary surrender. He turned, his gaze like twin shards of ice, dissecting me, searching for weakness. He would find none. Not for myself, no. My fear was a hollow echo compared to the roaring inferno of my purpose. This isn't about me, my voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the suffocating quiet. It felt a foreign weapon, one I hadn't known I possessed. Not anymore. My freedom, my life, they're already forfeit. But theirs? The forgotten, the crushed, the omegas you dismiss as inconvenient shadows. My hand, trembling slightly, gestured towards the city's unseen suffering beneath its glittering facade. They will not be forgotten again. His lips, a thin line, barely twitched. He expected defiance, perhaps tears, a desperate plea for my own liberty. He did not expect this. My voice, now gaining strength, filled the vast space. Community clinics. Funded, staffed, safe shelters, not just temporary shacks. Basic rights. Medical care. A chance at dignity for those you've stripped bare. I met his gaze, refusing to flinch, refusing to break. That is the price of my cooperation, Alistair. My full cooperation. You want me to play your game? Then we play by my rules for them. A muscle in his jaw flexed, the only visible sign of his reaction. His eyes, usually unreadable depths, held a sudden, sharp interest. He had bought a pawn, he had acquired a queen. A dangerous, principled queen whose passion burned brighter than the penthouse's chandeliers. He said nothing, simply watched me, a silent appraisal that felt more intimate, more invasive, than any touch. And then, he simply nodded. An almost imperceptible tilt of his head. The terms were set, the gilded cage now came with new conditions. From that moment, the sterile opulence of his world began to bleed into the raw, pulsating heart of mine. He didn't just agree, he observed. Through the myriad eyes his vast network provided, he saw me. He saw me not just confined, but working. He saw me descend into the city's underbelly, the places he only knew as statistics and inconvenient problems. He saw my hands, gentle and stained, dressing wounds in makeshift clinics that sprung up like desperate flowers in barren concrete. He heard my voice, soft but resolute, offering solace, advocating for the forgotten, igniting sparks of hope where only ashes remained. He saw me in the hushed desperation of a soup kitchen, hair falling across my face as I ladled warmth into outstretched bowls. He saw me navigating treacherous alleys, a beacon of improbable light, negotiating with street lords for access to the very people his world had discarded. He saw the way the lost looked at me, not with pity, but with a fierce, quiet trust. And Alistair, the man who sought to own me, began to see something else entirely. Not just a pawn, not a prisoner, but a force of nature. A woman whose heart beat for the downtrodden, whose spirit refused to be caged, even when her body was. He had expected to break me. Instead, he found himself watching, captivated, as I slowly, irrevocably, began to break down the walls around his own carefully constructed, icy world. Each act of my defiant compassion was a chisel, chipping away at his formidable defenses, leaving him, intrigued. And something more, something he hadn't anticipated, a disturbing, irresistible pull. The city thrummed with a new energy, a palpable shift in its ancient bones, and I, Eloan, was its architect. The roar of the crowd, a symphony of hope and desperation, had become my daily bread, intoxicating in its power. Each small victory for social justice, each concrete change etched into the city's unforgiving landscape, was a sweet, dangerous elixir. I felt the pulse of this awakening, the collective breath of thousands held in anticipation, a weight that both exhilarated and terrified me. My influence grew like a vine, strong and verdant, reaching for the light, but I knew, with a chill that traced its way down my spine, that it also cast long, hungry shadows. The adoration was a fragile thing, easily shattered. I felt the shift first in the subtle glances, the whispers that followed me like a phantom limb. A fleeting, almost imperceptible coolness in the eyes of those who had once been fervent allies. It was the prickle of being watched, the unsettling sense of a predator circling just beyond the periphery of sight. The city, once my canvas, now felt like a cage, its very walls closing in, imbued with a watchful malice. Elder Silas. The name itself was a viper's hiss in the gilded halls of power. He was the city's decrepit heart, a man whose roots plunged deep into the soil of old money, into the illicit operations that greased the gears of this tarnished metropolis. His power was a silent, suffocating thing, a cobweb spun from generations of corruption. My reforms, my audacious attempts to tear down the crumbling facade and rebuild with transparency, were an anathema to him, a direct challenge to the very air he breathed. I could feel his gaze, not physically, but like a phantom pressure, a cold, calculating weight on my soul. He saw me not as a reformer, but as a disruptive virus, threatening to burn down his carefully constructed empire of shadows. The first anomalies were so small, so innocuous, they might have been dismissed as mere oversight. A file misplaced, a digital record subtly altered, an email chain vanishing into the ether. Then came the whispers, insidious as smoke, curling around my achievements, questioning my motives. A colleague, usually steadfast, shifted uncomfortably in my presence, their eyes avoiding mine, a telltale sign of doubt being sown. It was a meticulous, chilling orchestration, a campaign waged in the dark corners of the digital world and the hushed tones of exclusive clubs. Fabricated evidence, invisible threads woven into the tapestry of my professional life, designed to paint me as a mercenary, a thief. Corporate espionage, embezzlement. The words, when they finally reached me, felt like shards of ice, sharp and searing. My breath hitched. They weren't just attacking my work, they were attacking my very essence, aiming to strip away my credibility, to leave me bare and broken before the public I had fought so hard to serve. This wasn't just a political battle, it was a war for my soul, a brutal campaign to discredit and destroy. The realization was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, a familiar fear, exquisitely honed, sharpened by the thrill of the chase. I had challenged a monster, and now, its fangs were bared, ready to strike. But beneath the fear, a flicker, a spark of defiant fire. They might try to bury me, but I would not go down quietly. Not while the city still held its breath, waiting for its champion to fall or to fight.
The city, once a vibrant hum of ambition, now screamed. Its voice, amplified by every screen, every headline, every venomous whisper, was directed solely at me. Eloan. Corrupt, liar, betrayer. The words blazed across digital billboards, plastered over newsprint, echoed by talking heads whose faces contorted with feigned outrage. Doctored photos, fabricated emails, a tapestry of deceit woven with malicious precision by Silas's unseen hand, painted me as a monster. My reform efforts, our shared vision for a better world, twisted into a cynical charade for personal gain. It was a brutal public execution of my character, and the sheer audacity of it left me breathless, gasping for air in a world suddenly devoid of truth. The acrid scent of betrayal hung heavy, coiling in my lungs with every ragged breath. Yet, amidst the deafening roar of public condemnation, one voice remained steady, a low thrum beneath the cacophony. Alistair. My name, spoken by him, wasn't a curse but a shield. I saw the footage, the flashing cameras, the aggressive microphones thrust into his face, the veiled threats from his own board members in hushed, furious tones. He stood firm, his jaw tight, eyes like molten gold refusing to waver. He was a rock in a tidal wave, and a strange, dangerous warmth bloomed in my chest, a desperate hope I hadn't known I still possessed. How could he, the master of manipulation, the man who thrived in shadows, offer such unwavering light? It was a paradox that both terrified and thrilled me, binding me to him in a way I hadn't dared to acknowledge. The chill of metal on my wrists was not a surprise, merely the inevitable culmination of Silas's machinations. The uniformed officers, faceless agents of a system now turned against me, moved with chilling efficiency. The sterile scent of antiseptic and stale fear permeated the high-security detention center, a world of locked doors and muffled sounds, designed to strip away identity and hope. Each clang of a heavy door, each echo in the desolate corridor felt like another nail in my coffin. I was alone, truly alone, confined within 4 cold walls, the outside world judging and condemning, my spirit battered but not yet broken. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, threatening to suffocate me. Then, a whisper of a key, the soft click of a lock, and there he was, Alistair. His presence filled the cramped visitation room, eclipsing the harsh fluorescent lights, his dark suit a stark contrast to the sterile environment. His eyes, usually pools of calculated control, were laced with a raw, desperate urgency I hadn't seen before. He sat opposite me, the thick glass partition a cruel barrier between us, yet his gaze bridged the distance, burning with an intensity that promised both salvation and a different kind of captivity. Eloan. His voice, a low rumble, was strained, carrying an unspoken plea. This is a trap. Every move, every word twisted. They'll break you here. He leaned forward, his palm pressed against the glass, a desperate, silent plea for connection. I have a way out. A private jet. A route out of the country. A place where no one can find you. My protection. You'll be safe.
The glare of 1,000 camera flashes was a physical assault, each click a hammer blow against her already fractured resolve. Eloan stood, or rather, sagged, in the blinding crucible of the public eye, the weight of accusation pressing down on her like a tombstone. Every whispered judgment, every venomous headline, felt like a branding iron against her skin. The trial was a macabre spectacle, designed not for justice, but for her public immolation. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, a desperate bird trapped in a cage of unforgiving light. How had her life become this grotesque carnival of scrutiny? She yearned for darkness, for silence, for the one man whose touch, however dangerous, promised a strange kind of sanctuary amidst the storm. Alistair. His name was a silent plea, a burning ember in the ash of her despair. He was her only hope against this relentless, unforgiving machine. Yet, even as she clung to that fragile thread, a tremor of fear snaked through her. What dark corners would he have to explore to save her? What price would she ultimately pay for his salvation, for being tethered to a man who lived so close to the precipice? Miles away, Alistair Vance moved with the predatory grace of a man who owned the night. He watched the live feed of the courtroom, his jaw clenched, the cold fury in his eyes a stark contrast to the quiet hum of the high-tech operations room around him. Each flash of a camera bulb on Eloan's pale, vulnerable face was a fresh wound, a spark igniting a deeper, more dangerous resolve within him. He wouldn't just defend her, he would dismantle the very architects of her torment. Silas. The name tasted like ash, a bitter promise of retribution. He paced, a restless shadow among the glowing screens, his presence a palpable force that commanded absolute obedience. His gaze, usually so controlled, now burned with a barely contained inferno. He would tear apart the fabric of reality if it meant clearing her name, no matter the blood price. I want everything. Alistair's voice was a low growl, devoid of any warmth, slicing through the tense silence. Every transaction, every communication, every ghost in the machine. Dig into Silas Thorne's past, his present, his digital footprint. Unearth every anomaly, every hidden thread. I don't care how deep you have to go, or how many layers of obfuscation you have to strip away. Find the tell, the lie, the evidence that rips this frame up to shreds. His team, a hand-picked assembly of brilliant, morally flexible minds, ex-intelligence operatives, digital forensics masters, financial wizards, worked with a silent, focused intensity. Fingers danced across keyboards, algorithms churned, vast data streams were siphoned and analyzed. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the electric hum of supercomputers, a symphony of relentless pursuit. Days blurred into nights, fueled by an urgency that mirrored Alistair's own unyielding obsession. Slowly, meticulously, a chilling mosaic began to form on the panoramic screens. What started as whispers in the dark corners of the internet coalesced into undeniable patterns. Shell corporations, like a nest of vipers, appeared in offshore havens, meticulously crafted to obscure ownership. Encrypted communication channels, buried deep within the dark web, revealed a clandestine network, a spiderweb spun with chilling precision. Each node, each transaction, each ghost server, whispered Silas Thorne's name. He wasn't just implicated, he was the architect, the puppet master pulling the strings of a conspiracy far more intricate and insidious than they had first imagined. The digital fingerprints were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, a testament to a mind as brilliant as it was depraved. Alistair watched the unfolding truth, a grim satisfaction settling in his heart. They had found the monster. Now, he would unleash his own. And God help anyone who stood in his way. The air in the courtroom was a suffocating shroud, thick with the scent of stale paper, polished wood, and the electric hum of 1,000 cameras. Every lens in the vast chamber was a hungry eye, fixed on me, stripping away my defenses, laying bare every vulnerability for the insatiable maw of public consumption. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, as the gavel's sharp crack signaled the beginning of my trial. A media circus, they called it, and I was the main attraction, the villainess, the temptress, the thief. Silas, a viper in bespoke tailoring, took the stand, his gaze raking over me with a calculated cruelty that made my skin crawl. He spoke of my alleged crimes with a sickening eloquence, weaving a tapestry of deceit and manipulation that branded me a monster. His voice, once a seductive whisper in my ear, was now a weapon, each word a poisoned dart aimed directly at my soul. He presented his ironclad evidence, fabricated emails, doctored invoices, a tangled web of lies meticulously crafted to condemn me. The courtroom buzzed, a collective gasp rippling through the rows as he painted me as a mastermind, a heartless opportunist who had bled his company dry. I felt the hot flush of shame, a burning indignation that threatened to consume me. How could anyone believe such venomous falsehoods? How could they not see the cold, calculating hatred in his eyes, a hatred that mirrored the insidious betrayal I had suffered at his hands? Just as despair threatened to drag me into its crushing embrace, a shadow fell across the room, a presence that commanded attention without uttering a single sound. Alistair. My breath caught in my throat, a primal instinct flaring to life within me. He moved with a predator's grace, his dark suit a stark contrast to the sterile environment, his eyes a dangerous storm. He hadn't been merely my lawyer, he had been my anchor, my tormentor, my salvation. He was everything I feared and everything I craved, and now, he stepped forward, his voice a low, resonant rumble that cut through the lingering whispers. If the court pleases, he began, his gaze sweeping over the jury, each word delivered with a precision that was both chilling and captivating. He did not raise his voice, yet every syllable echoed with an undeniable authority. He took Silas's elaborate fabrications, one by one, and systematically, ruthlessly, began to dismantle them. He spoke of metadata, of digital timestamps, of IP addresses traced not to me, but to a secure server owned by Silas himself. He presented irrefutable proof of digital forgeries, a technological ballet of deceit orchestrated by the very man who sought my ruin. My eyes never left Alistair's face, a silent testament to the fragile trust that bound us. He was a force of nature, a dark night in a courtroom drama, revealing the insidious paper trail that linked Silas directly to the fabricated documents, to the siphoning of funds, to the very crimes he had so eagerly, so viciously, pinned on me. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, morphing into gasps, then outright shouts. The carefully constructed facade of Silas's innocence shattered, revealing the manipulative villain beneath. The judge's gavel slammed, a desperate attempt to quell the rising storm of revelation. But it was too late. The truth, raw and undeniable, was unspooling, tearing through the carefully crafted lies, leaving a trail of chaos in its wake. And in the midst of it all, my gaze met Alistair's, a silent, electric current passing between us, a dangerous promise shimmering in the chaos. The game had truly begun. The air in the chamber grew thick, not with the usual pomp and circumstance, but with the suffocating weight of exposed truth. Each flicker of the holographic displays, each measured, damning word from Alistair, was a hammer blow against the gilded cage Silas had constructed around himself. His initial sneer, a practiced mask of contemptuous boredom, began to fray at the edges, revealing the raw, panicked flesh beneath. I watched him, a predator observing its cornered prey, my own heart a dark drum against my ribs. There was a dangerous thrill in witnessing the meticulously crafted illusion shatter, piece by excruciating piece. Alistair, a maestro of destruction, conducted his symphony of evidence with chilling precision. Bank transfers illuminated the screens, dates and figures screaming corruption. Whispers from informants, once dismissed as mere gossip, now solidified into unassailable fact. Silas's eyes, usually cold and calculating, darted frantically, a desperate animal searching for an escape that didn't exist. A bead of sweat, a single, traitorous drop, traced a path down his temple, glistening under the unforgiving lights. It was the first crack, the visible fissure in his formidable facade. The scent of fear, sharp and acrid, seemed to cling to the very air around him, a stark contrast to the expensive cologne he usually favored. Then came the roar, not from the crowd initially, but from Silas himself. A guttural sound, born of pure, unadulterated terror and rage. Lies. Fabrications. He shrieked, his voice cracking, the polished cadence of the councilman utterly obliterated. The carefully orchestrated decorum of the proceedings dissolved into chaos. He lunged forward, restrained only by the invisible boundaries of the courtroom, his face a grotesque mask of fury. His jaw worked, muscles twitching violently. You orchestrate this, Alistair. You, with your venomous tongue and your whore. She contaminates everything she touches. My breath hitched, a sharp intake of cold air. His words, meant to sting, instead ignited a cold fire within me, a dangerous flicker of primal fury. He dared to drag Eloan into his putrid downfall. Alistair, however, remained unmoved, his gaze unwavering, sharp as tempered steel. He simply watched Silas flail, a predator allowing its prey a last, futile struggle. Your desperation paints a clearer picture than any evidence, Silas, Alistair countered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through Silas's frantic cries. And your attempts to discredit those who expose your depravity only further solidify your guilt. The public, initially stunned into silence by the sudden eruption, began to stir. The murmuring grew, a tide turning against the man they had once revered. They saw it now, not the distinguished councilman, but the desperate, cornered rat, lashing out with impotent rage. Silas, sensing the shift, tried a different tactic, his voice dropping to a theatrical plea, tinged with feigned hurt. They conspire against me, Alistair, jealous of my influence. And Eloan, a pawn, a tool of his dark ambition, manipulated, perhaps even coerced into this charade. His eyes, bloodshot and frantic, swept across the faces of the council, begging for belief, for salvation. The lie hung heavy, palpable in the charged air, a transparent veil that fooled no one. It was a desperate, ugly thing, born of a mind already drowning in its own corruption. The council members, their faces grim, exchanged glances. The decision was no longer a matter of deliberation, but a formality. The murmurs from the public solidified into a unified groan of disgust. He had overplayed his hand, revealed the ugliness beneath the velvet gloves. The verdict came swiftly, an almost brutal efficiency. Guilty, the word echoed, reverberating through the stunned silence that followed. Stripped of his titles, his power, his very identity, Silas stood there, a hollowed-out shell. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen and slack. The terror was replaced by a profound, chilling emptiness. His empire, built on deceit and exploitation, crumbled around him. Federal prison. The words were a death knell, sealing his fate, consigning him to a darkness he had so readily inflicted upon others. And as they led him away, a broken, defeated man, I felt a strange, cold satisfaction bloom in my chest, a dark justice finally served. The world shifted, irrevocably altered, and a new, dangerous chapter began. The air, once thick with the acrid scent of fear and the unspoken threat of Silas's shadow, now tasted different. Clean, sharp with the promise of a new dawn, yet still carrying the faint, metallic tang of battles hard won. Months had bled into one another, each passing day like a suture closing a gaping wound in the city's heart, leaving behind a scar that was both a testament to pain and a mark of survival. The collective sigh of relief was palpable, a gentle hum beneath the revitalized cityscape, a symphony of souls finally daring to breathe free. I stood on the precipice of it all, gazing out at the gleaming facade of the city's new community medical center. My center, a monument to resilience, born from the very resources Alistair had once wielded with such calculated ruthlessness, now bent to a purpose far more luminous. The sterile scent of new paint and polished chrome mingled with a subtle, hopeful aroma of blooming jasmine carried on the breeze, a strange, beautiful juxtaposition. My name, once whispered in fear or pity, was now spoken with reverence, a leader etched into the city's reclaimed identity. It was a crown I wore with both pride and a heavy awareness of the sacrifices it had demanded, the blood that had paved this path. Inside, the halls buzzed with a different kind of energy. No longer would the Omegas live on the fringes, their cries unheard, their bodies vulnerable. Legal protections, opportunities for education and growth, a voice that could no longer be silenced. These were the foundations we had laid, brick by agonizing brick. My own past, a ghost that once haunted my every step, now felt like a compass, guiding me, fueling the fire in my veins. Every smile I saw on the faces of those entering the center, every glimmer of hope in their eyes, was a victory against the darkness we had conquered. A subtle shift in the air, a familiar scent, dark spice, old leather, and something undeniably primal, announced his presence before his shadow fell beside mine. Alistair. He stood, silent as always, his gaze sweeping over the burgeoning life below, the same fierce intensity in his eyes that had once commanded empires of shadow. Now, that power was tethered, focused, a controlled inferno burning for a different kind of conquest. Our shared struggle had forged a bond between us more potent than any chain, more intricate than any spell. It was born of desperation and defiance, sealed with desperation and desire. "It's magnificent, Eloan," he murmured, his voice a low thrum that vibrated deep within me, pulling at threads only he could reach. "Everything you envisioned, more." I turned to him, my eyes meeting his, a universe of unspoken history passing between us. The edges of his lips curved in that slow, possessive smile that still had the power to make my breath catch. "It's *Rs, Alistair," I corrected softly, the emphasis deliberate. "Every resource, every battle, every risk taken, it led us here." My hand, almost without conscious thought, reached for his, fingers intertwining. His skin was warm, a steady anchor against the tremor of emotion that always accompanied his proximity. He squeezed my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles with an intimate tenderness that belied the formidable man he was. Indeed, a new city, a new dawn, and a new partnership. His gaze deepened, locking with mine, a silent promise burning in their depths. There was a hunger there, a possessive fire that had not diminished with peace, but rather sharpened, refined. We stood on the precipice not just of a progressive era for the city, but for us. Two forces, once clashing, now irrevocably intertwined, ready to carve out a future that was both brighter and, in its own dark, delicious way, infinitely more dangerous. The world had changed, but the untamed heart of our connection beat stronger than ever, a seductive, powerful pulse driving us forward, together.